Welcome to the 28th Miami Jewish Film Festival, the largest Jewish film festival in the world. We want to thank all of our members, sponsors, community partners, volunteers, all of you film lovers, and especially our presenting sponsors, SAGE, the Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education, and the Greater Miami Jewish Federation for their continued support throughout all these years. My name is Mark Kravitz. I am the chair of SAGE, the Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education. I'm on the board of the Greater Miami Jewish Federation, and I'm a past proud chair of the Miami Jewish Film Festival. I'm excited to be moderating a virtual conversation with Udi Zaken, who is the director of the film that we just saw, My Father's Garden. And I'm happy to have all of you joining us today for our conversation. So thank you, Udi, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Just to give you a heads up on me, I am gay with 2 kids and have aging parents, and I related a lot to your story, and it brought me to tears at certain points because I related to a lot of what you had to say. But today it's clearly not about me, it's about you. And the first thing I want to ask you is if you could give us an update on your journey to parenthood. How's that going?
Yeah, so unfortunately, after actually the film screened, the surrogate did have a miscarriage at 7 weeks. And I tried several times after that in Mexico, and it did not take, but I'm in the process here in the United States. It's been a year already. I have embryos ready to implant. Hopefully will be assigned a surrogate within a month or two. So I'm still trying.
Okay, it's a journey for sure.
It's definitely a journey.
Yeah. And how are your folks doing?
My dad actually passed away 2 months after the screening of the film. We screened the film at school. This was my thesis film on August 15th. He passed away October 2nd. So my, yeah, and we actually flew to Israel to give him a burial, which was October 4th, and we ended up October 7th in Israel. His Shiva was during October 7th. So it was pretty traumatic time. My mom is doing okay, as you know, she's still grieving. We're all grieving, but yeah.
Very sorry to hear that. May his memory be a blessing for all of you.
Yeah, it was amazing to do that film. Never thought that it would allow me to open up to him as much as I did for us to have that closure before he passed away. He was definitely deteriorating cognitively, as you could see in the film, but we did not think that um, in some ways, I'm sometimes think that me and him having that opportunity to talk about things almost allowed him to let go when he needed to.
Yeah, that makes sense, actually. Well, I'm glad you had those moments before you passed away. Um, I
Thank you.
wanted to talk to you about your father. And throughout the film, he kind of juggles his concerns about your homosexuality between where he comes from, coming from Kurdish background and being Jewish. What would you say influenced him more in terms of his concerns about you being gay and some stereotypes that he was talking about throughout the film?
I definitely think foremost was his background. I mean, he immigrated to Israel shortly after Israel became a state, but I think he was 80 years old, and they really held on to their tradition, and it's a blessing and a difficulty where a family is so tight. He had 11 siblings. So really, when I came out, which was in, late 90s, it was really different. And so I think his background really made it difficult for him because he didn't know anyone who was gay, and And he thought it was basically, I really think he believed, like he said, you're going to end up on the streets, a drug addict. That's what he thought. So it took time, and though when he slowly saw that that was, and I have to say, back then I think I believed him. I too didn't know really anyone gay, and um, so over time he kind of saw that that was not the case. He saw that, and that. And I saw that, but besides that, also his personality, he did have a very, very kind of little bit of an inflexible personality. He had his view, and as you saw in the film, like when he says, you made a mistake. There's the right thing, the wrong thing. That's kind of how I grew up, hearing that there was the right thing and wrong thing, and internalized that. And it's still a struggle, honestly, today, kind of even him passing away. What would he think? Is this the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do? So oddly, when the dementia kind of progressed, he kind of let that go, and he became more kind of relaxed about things. And I was able to get closer to him and just be in the moment, and not worry about, you know, anything that could go wrong. And it was this the right decision or the wrong decision? And that really allowed me to get close to him. So I think it was a combination of things, but definitely his background, his heritage had a lot to do with it.
It's interesting. You mentioned as his dementia progressed, he kind of loosened up or softened up in a way. And I couldn't help but relate to that to him telling you when you were younger that something was wrong with you, and a realization later in his life that something was, quote, wrong with him in terms of him getting ill. Do you think that realization, consciously or subconsciously, could have had something to do with him being able to come to terms with who you were in a more positive and constructive way?
I think so. I think he, him getting ill, and early on, he knew that he was something was different. Although for a long time he really fought it, and kind of did not want to admit. But there are scenes actually where I talked to, which were not didn't end up in the film, where we talk about dying, and he actually asks my opinion, like, what do you think happens after you die? Do you think you just disappear, or do you think there's but I think he did realize he was getting ill. And I think I also felt from him like he knew that the time was coming to an end. And he started to reflect about that. And he was, even though he presented himself as such a strong man, and in some ways he wasn't afraid of some things. In other ways, he was, I think, very scared of other things. And that fed into his fear about me being gay and how I would end up. But I think it was partly the illness and partly maybe the finality of life, realizing um, maybe I need to let go of some of these things. Again, it was a shock, that last scene where he said, uh, that he realized that he made a mistake. He didn't say sorry. He didn't use those words, but I heard it as sorry, and saying, I was wrong. This is how I thought things were. But then I realized that I definitely think it was definitely the illness softening the anxiety, but also the finality, and kind of realizing what was important in life, and letting go of some of his anxiety and control, and really listening to me and seeing me.
And in terms of you, you also went through some changes at a certain point in your life. The movie starts, you briefly discussed yourself when you were younger and when you started medical school, and then you kind of pass over to age 48, being divorced, and take it over from this very specific moment in time. Can you tell us a little bit about the years prior to turning 48 and how you were during those times, what may have changed between those times in terms of who you were perhaps discuss your relationship then, and why at that point in your life you decided that that was where you would start your film. That's where your story started for this film.
Yeah, I think there were changes in my life really going on that kind of probably led me to open up and decide to do this film about my dad. I could have chosen other subjects, but yeah, I the 10 years before starting the film, I used to live in San Francisco where I met my ex. We moved to LA. Possibly I was trying to get closer to the family and him, but also maintain a distance. Um, I was a psychiatrist. I had a business that really grew, and I sold it, and I felt like, and I got married about 4 years before. Um, I felt like finally settled, and I actually wanted kids, and my ex did not want to have kids, and um, that is actually something that he asked me when we started dating, and I didn't think I wanted kids back then. I told him no, but he was adamant that he did not want kids, and I think that did have something to do with our relationship kind of becoming more distant and ending. So that was a big thing, selling my business, getting divorced, and feeling like I needed something more. I really, I realize, I think part of me now wanting kids was actually um, doing what my dad did not want me to. He wanted me to have kids, and it was almost like being defiant and saying, "No, I don't want a family," where I think I really did. And so as I softened up, he did, and I realized that is what I wanted to do. So yeah, I ended up selling my business, getting divorced, going to film school and kind of starting on the surrogacy journey as well. But I was very, now I say I wish I wasn't so, defined with my dad, or maybe I see myself, maybe I was I could have been softer with him, but I think I couldn't. You see him at the film and he seems softer, and but that's not how he was. He was a very strict father, and I had to maintain boundaries. And so I kind of softened up, and there was a change in me that I was willing. Yeah, I did not expect the film to go the way it did, because when we were trying to have conversations often before the film, it would end up in an argument. I would really cut him off. I did not want to listen, and maybe it was the camera was there, so I was willing to kind of listen. I felt like I had an audience, like I'm not like here, see how he talks to me. But maybe he saw that as me showing interest in him finally, because I always cut him off. And so it really led to this magical situation where we actually listened to each other, and it really did change me in I was in therapy at the time, and I remember telling my therapist, like, I don't understand why he wants me to get married, and my interpretation is just he's ashamed of me. And she said something that really struck. She said, well, I can understand that you're disappointed that he still wants you to get married, and but to say that he's ashamed of you, that's your interpretation. We don't know what's going on in his mind. It could be that he's it's just that this is what he knows, or he really thinks that my life would be better, but it's my interpretation, and that really stuck. And it actually something I took with me beyond the film, when people say something and I interpret it immediately to mean, oh, I'm not good enough, or I kind of stop and say, well, maybe it's their insecurity, maybe it's something about them. So that's like a gift that I took from that experience that I really think was a big change for me.
Now, do you think your father, your parents were more focused on you getting married or having children? Because it seemed like the end game that your father would refer to when you got married was so you could have children. And once you announced to them that you were pursuing that, it certainly wasn't the quote straight way to do it. But they both immediately seemed very excited. Their faces both lit up, and they certainly had confidence in you becoming a father. Uh, do you think that that was really their ultimate goal more than you getting married? And your father just perhaps thought that, oh, the only way to do it was to get married?
I really do. I think, I finally realized that kids did bring him a lot of joy in his life. And yeah, like I said before, he was somewhat inflexible in his thinking. So maybe, he could have thought, okay, well, not everyone needs that, but that really did bring him joy in his life and meaning. And he always wanted us around him. So I think that was also a realization for me that he really, it did come from a good place. Whereas before I saw it as another way to try to control me and tell me what to do. I finally kind of softened up and saw it, heard it as a loving gesture, like him saying, I want for you what I've had. And and I also realized that I was kind of being defiant, almost like denying myself something. Um, it was even early on in my 20s when I came out, even before I came out, I kind of rejected Judaism because I felt like, oh, they're going to reject me. I need to be defiant. And so I realized later that I was denying myself things in life that I love Judaism. I love the traditions, what it gave me in my life. And just because I'm gay and maybe traditionally the religion was rejecting, I felt like I was going to reject it first. So yeah, I definitely, if it felt like a loving gesture and him saying, I want something for you that has brought me joy. Um, and so and we could bond over that.
I remember in the film when you told your mother that you were pursuing surrogacy, how elated she was. She immediately said "B'sha'a tova," which is a very straight way, I would say, to refer to a gay man having children, because it really refers to the pregnancy itself. And you clearly were not pregnant yourself. Um, and I want to talk about your mom, because she's kind of the best supporting actor in this film. She's quite the mediator. She was a wonderful caretaker for your father. There was a beautiful moment when she discussed her struggles with it. Can you tell us a little bit about how your mother was when you were growing up and during these years prior to where the film started in terms of your own journey?
Yeah, definitely. We've always had, as opposed to my dad, me and my mom had a very close relationship, and I've always felt very safe and close to her. I could tell her about something I wanted to do, and she would be supportive, as opposed to my dad, who would come up with, all the reasons why I was making a mistake and it might not work. So I felt close to her shortly after I came out to, they both came around, but my dad kept this I think agenda or belief that he thought he could change me over time, where she really accepted me, and in fact she became my ally, and in fact she even she would fight with him to, like, when he would say things that, like, oh, maybe you'll find a woman or something, she would fight him on that. So I really felt like she was an ally. But so she knew the tension between us. I think she always wished it was different, and you can see it in the film. But it was even more intense because, again, when he was younger, he was more of an intense, more strong, more really had an impact on all of us. And she felt that she needed to be a mediator. And I think she kept the family as best as she could. She kind of tried to be the glue between everyone. And uh, so yes, she pretty much was like in the film, but even more. And she was definitely there for me from the time I came out mm, till now. She's I ended up after my dad passing away, I did end up moving closer to her. Now I live closer to her, and she's hopeful that I have a child and will help me raise them. And yeah, she's a strong person in my life.
As is your sister.
My sister is a strong person. In some ways, she struggled even more than I did. Even though she's straight, my dad coming from a Kurdish background, I think it's very interesting. In some ways, he idealizes his sisters as they're the strongest, best women in the whole world. But for some reason, for his own children, he was always more critical. And as a woman, he was even more critical of her. So I think she got even more of the brunt of it. Uh, I do think the film helped her in ways too, to kind of, like I say in the film, we were both doing the same things. We were taking what my dad was doing and saying and kind of interpreting in a way to say we're not good enough, and doing it in other places in our lives and other relationships in our lives, and kind of seeing, no, he's not that perfect person that he presented himself or wanted us to believe. He has his own insecurities and his own limits. And let's stop kind of interpreting everything as we're not good enough. And seeing that he did the best he could. And he loves us, and it did come from a place of love. But you know what? I remember I had a mentor in my psychiatry residency who said, parents think they're perfect and they're selfless. They're not. They're imperfect, and they are also selfish like any other person. And they try to do the best they can, but sometimes they are selfish and they want things that will work for them. But if we can see through that and feel the love and caring, I think that can really help us to kind of find peace and enjoy relationships more.
I want to talk about the garden.
Mhm.
Uh, Clearly, there was a reason for you bringing the garden into this film. I am thinking of the moment where you were talking to your dad and you referred to a grapevine behind you that you seemed to be implying that was pretty dead. Um, and he expressed to you that he was very confident that it was going to come back to life. And I'm watching this garden, and clearly it was your father's favorite place to be. He could spend hours just sitting there, but it was full of imperfections.
Mhm.
And I was wondering what your purpose was of incorporating the garden, what symbolism you saw in bringing the garden into the story.
Yeah, the film was actually the name was, I think, something like Me, My Dad, and a Camera, or some combination of that. And it wasn't, I actually didn't pick the name My Father's Garden until shooting that last scene in the garden. And it was because it was so profound of what happened. I mean, I remember the few days after that scene and feeling like there was nothing else I needed in life anymore, because I heard my dad kind of say, "I'm sorry," and I mean, kind of saying, you're good the way you are. And it happened in that garden, but yeah, there was a lot more to the garden, right? It was imperfect. Yeah, he had a wheelbarrow there, and a bunch of stuff, and But I mean, isn't that what life is? It is. It's not perfect. Parents are not perfect. We're not perfect. When I have a child, hopefully, I know I'm not going to be perfect. So life is not. So that's another metaphor for the garden. There's also the renewal. There's life and death. Nothing lives forever. It has its peak. It's good times and bad times, and eventually it dies. So there's that metaphor. And for me, really growing up as a gay teenager, I mean, I didn't come out really until first year in medical school. And, I have a lot of gay friends who talk about having a support group of other gay peers. I didn't. And for me, gardening was such a it helped me get through those difficult times. And I think also because, like, I think I said that in the film, that there was something to look forward to. You plant something, whether it's a seed or and you know that it's going to grow and it's going to flower, it's going to fruit. And so when I realized what happened in the garden, I was like, that is a perfect name, because that's what life is. And he talks about nature. My father grew up kind of his parents were more religious, and we always he went to synagogue and stuff, but we weren't like Shomer Shabbat or but I love that I love nature, and the fact that he said God is nature, God is in nature, that's something I could relate to. So felt like garden, plants, flowers, life. It had so much meaning, and it was perfect for what was happening in the film. Like life is far from perfect. Relationships are far from perfect, but they're still beautiful, and it's what we have, and we need to cultivate them and really try to get the best out of them.
And when your father equated nature and God, it was kind of like he was saying God isn't perfect either.
Right, right. He was saying that, yeah, which is, it's interesting because I think he raised us as if life was perfect. And you see him saying, oh, don't make a mistake. There's right and there's wrong. I think he grew up thinking that that's what life was, and so in a way that also was his kind of growth and coming around and realizing life is not perfect, God is not perfect, but there's still, a parent is far from perfect. And if God is far from perfect, but there's a reason for us to have him in our lives. In whatever way you see God, if it's nature, if it's spiritual, if it's there's a reason why God is so important for so many people. And yeah, it kind of all ties together.
Yeah, it was very beautiful. Um, well, I really thank you for this conversation. It was wonderful to meet you, and again, I was very touched personally by your film. I look forward to whatever you produce next, and I wish you the best of luck in your journey to become a parent. In my
Thank you.
personal opinion, it's totally worth it. So keep up the work and the faith. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all of our members, sponsors, community partners, volunteers, all of you film lovers. Thank you to SAGE, Greater Miami Jewish Federation, for their continued support. And thank you to our audience for participating in the 28th Annual Miami Jewish Film Festival. Thank you very much.